Welcome to the Business Legends Podcast, where we interview business leaders and entrepreneurs so that you can learn from their success, become inspired, and meet the people that make change happen. I'm the host of the show, Reese, along with my good friend, Mr. Scott Schroeder with the Proximity Group. Scott, thank you very much for joining me today.
Oh, Reese, I really appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. He is also the author of Behind the Colors, and we were just talking about this book a little bit off air, and from what I've read so far, which isn't much, you just gave it to me like 5 minutes ago, but it is a book about leadership, and it's a book that we can find. Where can we get this book?
Oh, it's on Amazon. In fact, Reese, since 2018, it's been in the top 2% of all books sold on Amazon.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome.
I mean, there are a lot of books
sold
on Amazon, so that's not saying a lot.
Yeah. But still, I mean, it's incredible that you got that accolade. And you wrote this book yourself. So briefly, can you explain to our guests like what the book is about, other than what I said? So it's about leadership, and it's about how militaristic aspects you can apply in your daily life.
Sure, Reese. I wrote it for the Army, and I wrote it for the enlisted force.
Okay.
Right, and so there are not a lot of books out there for enlisted leaders.
Sure.
And really, we tell soldiers and leaders at all levels, we want you to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And I wanted to try to boil things down for them.
Mm-hmm.
Say, if you master these 3 things at each level of leadership, that'll carry you on to the next level. So, for example, if a corporal or a sergeant,
closer to this mic here for me.
If a corporal or a sergeant learns to lead by personal example, train individual team and crew tasks, and inspect, that carries them. They'll never not do that during their career. So that carries them. And so you learn those as stepping stones to each level of leadership.
Yeah. Now when you say inspect, what do you mean specifically by that? Are you saying make sure that the job is done correctly, or what's your thoughts behind that?
Yeah, it's inspect. It's the same thing we would do in the private sector, in the corporate world. In fact, I was having a conversation with a construction professional a couple weeks ago, and they were getting ready to go out to a job site, and I asked them what they were looking at, and they didn't have a really focused answer. So I went back and started thinking to myself, and I used to tell my troopers, every time I look at you, that's an inspection.
Yeah.
I'm looking at your hair, I'm looking at your uniform, I'm looking at the equipment you have. If there's a vehicle, I'm looking at the vehicle, and it just grew. So as I grew, officer brigades aren't measured, and we had a dining facility that served roughly 3,000 meals a day.
Wow.
Right, for 3,500 troopers.
That's like the world's largest kitchen almost.
Right. And so I don't know how
it's just nonstop, making sure we're recording. Oh, we're good.
Yeah, I don't know how to run a restaurant.
Yeah,
right?
I bet you do.
But I've been to a couple.
Yeah.
And so I just started off by looking around the outside, walking in and looking for trash on the ground.
Sure.
The first thing I look for is trash, and then the next place I would go is I wouldn't even go in the building. I would go around back to the dumpsters.
Yeah.
And look at the dumpsters. Is there trash outside the dumpsters? Are the lids closed on the dumpsters to keep with the flies and stuff? And go to the back dock. That's where they receive their supplies, and that's where field rations get shipped out from. Is it clean? And then I go in. The first stop when I go in is I go to the restroom.
Yeah.
What am I looking for? Is
cleanliness?
Is it clean?
Yeah. Are there paper towels? That's toilet paper? Yeah.
That's right. If that's not clean and that's not right, how can I trust what they're doing in the kitchen?
Yeah. Well, you're giving me a whole new fear, so thank you for that. But I was gonna say I never really thought about it like that, but I always think it's really inconvenient when. So first off, like if a restaurant is using a what's it called, the hand dryer.
Right.
If they use a hand dryer, I always hate that, because you see like a puddle underneath it. You always see a puddle underneath it. As opposed to using like a paper towel, which can be very clean and whatnot. But now that we're talking about it, it's like if you have a puddle here, then not only could you have things like mold or fungus or something like that growing underneath.
Yeah, but vectors get in there too.
And anything, and so you give me a new fear. Thank you for that. It's a tough business, the restaurant. I mean, I couldn't imagine doing that, but I think that there's so many people that miss out on their fundamentals. I have a good friend, also fellow business legend. His name's Marshall Monroe, and he had several restaurants, and he was also military background, and he said, he didn't know much about how to prepare food necessarily, but he knew systems. And so he wanted to make sure that if you came to his restaurant and you ordered whatever, steak and fries, they were the same steak and fries every single time. Were they good? Were they bad? I don't know, but they're gonna be the same. And that way you have a consistent, experience with the matter with that stuff. So you're definitely onto something with checking out the external factors that we don't really think about from an experience standpoint.
Yeah, so I came up with like I3. Whenever you're going to go out to a job site, if you're going out to a job site and a construction site, one you want to inspect, right? Then you want to involve the team that's there. They want to be heard.
Sure.
Right. So they want to be heard. They want to know that you understand what their challenges are, and if they have some challenges, are there some things that you can bring to them to help them?
Yeah.
Like, do you need to contact a trade partner to help them that they might not have? And the third thing is to inform them on what they're doing, how it matters to the organization and the business. And so I call that like the I3.
Okay.
So
I like it.
When you go out and inspect, I mean, I'm not a construction professional,
Right?
but I know if I go out to a construction site, the first thing I'm looking for is is there stuff all over the place?
Yeah. Is
Is it neat and orderly? Can emergency vehicles get in there?
Yeah.
Are people wearing their gear? Next thing I might want to ask the superintendent on site is, let's just look at the project schedule.
Yeah.
How are you doing how are you doing? Are you on schedule? I can't do what he does.
Yeah.
But he can explain things to me, and I can ask those questions.
Yeah.
And I can see what the issues resolve list.
Right.
I mean, do you have any issues that need resolving? That not everything's perfect when one of our trade partners works on something.
Sure.
And so, do you have any trade partners that have more items on this list than others? And do you need help connecting with them to get some? Maybe the foreman of that crew needs some fire under them, and I
that's where you can identify.
The inspector can call their boss and say, "Hey Bob, check it out."
This is the hole. You're identifying the hole in the program kind of thing.
Let's see the safety.
Yeah.
Let's see what's your safety issues that you might have. So those type of things.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. You were talking about the word inspect is very dear to me. I can't remember what networking group or something or leadership conference. I don't know what it was, but there was an expression that I've always remembered. It's you can only expect what you inspect. And it's like if you lose sight of something, that's not to say that you have to micromanage every single detail or anything like that. But if you lose sight of something on a project, it's amazing how many things like that people can take for granted.
Doesn't take much.
Yeah.
and I would tell you in combat, it would be when you would see things that people weren't doing certain things, and it would be so frustrating because you know the impact and the outcome, the negative consequences to just letting a couple things go. And when you let the little things go, big things happen.
Yeah. I distinctly remember. It's kind of a sad reference, but my old roommate was a lieutenant in the Marine Corps, and one of the things that when he was going through OCS, one of the things that they really instilled on him was the way that he laced his shoes. And he had this whole story about how it was so important, but then when he actually got to combat, he realized that the reason they had to be laced that way is so that a knife could cut through the laces so you could take the dog tag out if you needed to, and everything kind of has a purpose within the systems, and it's the military is very much run. It should be run in a buttoned up manner, but in a high stakes environment, of course, you have to allow your training to take over all the other pieces and stuff like that. So tell me about the proximity group. So you were in the Army for how long?
34 and a half years.
34 and a half years. Well, thank you for your service.
It's an honor.
And so where did the proximity group come from? Was this during your tenure at the Army, or did it start before or after, or how did that go?
Yeah, I didn't know what I was going to do when I left the Army. I knew I wanted to do two things, Reese. I wanted to write that book.
Okay.
And the other thing
Success.
I wanted to start a company, right? Okay. And I wanted to start a company.
Success again, yeah.
Yeah, I was looking at fitness,
okay.
Right? And I was going to do put a mobile fitness, like a gym together and move around. But I ended up getting pulled in, and I started working with this nonprofit. And I worked with a nonprofit, and the nonprofit was focused on helping veterans and first responders recover from physical and emotional injuries.
Wow.
And we did it through cycling.
Wow.
And we had 50 community-based riding groups, and we had about 6,000 participants.
Yeah.
And
what was the name of that organization?
It was called Project Hero.
Project Hero, okay. Project Hero, that sounds amazing. And then when we were speaking on the phone, you were saying you did crazy rides like from Well, tell me about it. Where were the rides?
Yeah, we
to
would
and
do.
from?
Yeah, we would bring folks up to 200 folks together
Wow.
about 8 times a year, and we would do rides like Minneapolis to Chicago.
Wow. How many miles is that?
I don't know, just
A lot.
400 or 500 miles.
Yeah, yeah.
We would do Jacksonville to New Orleans.
Wow.
You would think.
Wow, that's.
You would think there's no hills there, but there are bridges.
Yeah. And I bet
Bridges.
oh man, that was oof. Goodness gracious, that sounds a lot. Now, how long does it typically take you guys to do that? To the many miles?
Yeah, it'd be between 4 and 5 days.
Okay.
Between
Gotcha.
4 and 5 days.
And I'm sure you're super sore at the end of it.
Can be. It depends on if you're fit.
Yeah, true. And your nutrition, I should
You have to
imagine
get
as
used
well.
to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So how many hours a day are you cycling for that? Like 8?
It depends on the. It depends on the. Not 8. We wouldn't ride 8. I think we did. I think the longest one-day ride we did was like 113 miles.
Wow.
But that was with and we had different groups. We had different
Sure.
ability groups. So I was with the A group that day. We did about 113 miles, and it was probably around 4 or 5 hours maybe. I don't
Okay.
know. We average a little over whatever 19 miles an hour gets you.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
that's what our average was.
Yeah. That's neat. That's man. I could imagine cycling that long. I mean, I have a Peloton, and that's
Yeah.
you get going on that thing for 30 minutes. Now, of course, you get the heavy resistance, and for brief periods, you get up to like the 30 miles an hour and stuff like that. But still, it's tough, man.
But you're with a group, so
True.
I mean that's where the healing took place, was on
Yeah.
in the group, riding together and sharing hard times.
Yeah. Hard times create tough men.
Yeah.
That's the way that it goes.
We had some fantastic mechanics, right?
Mhm.
And we had folks that were in recumbent bikes. We had folks on hand cycles.
Oh wow.
We had double and triple amputees, and so we would
Wow.
have people that would be able to fabricate parts to bikes. We had one guy that he was a quad amputee. He was
Wow.
above the knee, below the knee, below the elbow, and one hand taken
Wow.
off. And so they fabricated a brake behind his seat, and he would lean back with his butt, and the bike would brake. Like,
Wow.
put the brakes on.
Yeah. Now, how did he? I'm not trying to be insensitive at all, but how did he like pedal? What was the mechanic?
Yeah, he had prosthetics.
Oh, prosthetics.
So he had
Okay.
prosthetics on the.
Yeah. Wow.
Right, so he's in an upright bike.
Wow, that's crazy. I've never seen anything quite like that, but I've certainly seen some handicap accessible bikes and things like that. But
Yeah.
man, I bet that was a wild experience. Talk about something that's motivating, man.
That was a good. It was a good transition job, and I had 10 direct reports,
Mm-hmm.
and I had 60 volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want a leadership challenge,
Oof.
volunteers, and,
Yeah.
and you need them. You love them. They're there for a lot of different reasons. They're
Yeah.
there for good, but they all have different motivations, and they all
Mhm.
have a bunch of great ideas.
Sure. So you have to like unify all of them somehow.
You have to explain to them that we only have limited resources.
Right.
So, yeah.
Same is true of all nonprofits,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
I think it's all any company
Yeah,
has limited
that's true.
resources, and so they have to apply those resources against what the priorities are.
True. I have a friend, and I won't say his name. I'll tell you after the show. But he is a leader of a nonprofit, and they do very, very good work and just extraordinary stuff. And he was telling me one time, he said, Reese, if I did it all over again, I would do this as a for-profit business because of all of the hoops that he had to jump through with nonprofit and the accounting regulations and things, just everything down to like the financial matters, because their books have to show zero at the end of the year.
Right.
So it's like, how do you apply this, and then you're worried about the next year type of thing instead of maybe making a business type decision. And he said something very powerful to me. He said, in order for a company to be effective, they have to be financially effective. They have to have their finances in place at least enough to where they can make an impact. So to be impactful,
Right.
that stuff. Okay, so you work for this nonprofit. By the way, are you still involved with them? Do you do anything with them? Or are you riding with them?
I haven't been with them in a while.
Okay,
So,
gotcha. You think you would do another long ride like that, or?
oh sure, I would.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would. I haven't been riding a lot lately.
Mhm.
I've been sticking on the mountain bike lately.
Yeah, well, I don't blame you. It's been 1 billion degrees here in North Carolina. It's been way too hot for all that. But I got into running very recently, and man, I just don't even want to run. Even when I get up at 5 in the morning, it's still 80 something degrees already, so I'm like, just give it another month. I'll run on the treadmill for a month, you know. It's too hot. But okay, so you went from the nonprofit, and then did the proximity group come next, or
No, I went to I worked with I got pulled in. I was finishing up the book, and I got pulled into a company that it's a manufacturing company, but they work in simulation.
Okay.
And so it was about marksmanship, and you could shoot
cool.
pistols through grenade launchers into
Wow.
simulation. And it was two guys that started 20 years ago. They started 20 years ago in their kitchen with an Atari.
Wow.
Right, and they had a gopher hunting application in there, and that's how they started. And now they have 100 employees.
Wow.
And they have law enforcement, military, hunting, and entertainment division.
Wow.
And it was fantastic.
And it's all virtual, or?
Yeah, they did. Well, it wasn't virtual. It was simulation.
Okay.
And then they were going, when I was leaving, right before I was leaving, they were going into augmented reality.
Oh wow.
So you could shoot laser, rubber bullets, so like training munitions,
Sure.
and ball into augmented reality. Augmented reality is like putting virtual targets in the real world.
Okay.
So in this room right here, and you could have a real target and virtual target.
Yeah.
And you could engage them with any of those.
Wow, that's that's wild. I bet that serves a crazy purpose for training purposes.
Yeah.
I mean, and plus munitions being so expensive. I mean, I bet you could save a bunch of money by enrolling the program.
But you could also, you could go. A law enforcement team could come in here and they could clear this whole building, right?
Yeah.
And they could do it in the building with those virtual entities in the
Yeah.
building, and you could also have people in here.
Yeah. Wow.
So they would have to
That's
do
cool.
target discrimination, and make sure that they're doing the right thing.
Yeah. Not to get too caught in the weeds on that, but how do they what's the word? Like recoil, and of course guns are loud. I mean, those are two pieces to it. But how do they compensate for recoil? So like, how would a virtual?
Yeah, those we had CO2. So we had CO2, and you could fire. I would be lying if I told you exactly how many rounds it was, because I don't remember. But up to 500.
Okay.
I think with a full load of CO2 inside the.
Yeah, and is the recoil similar?
Almost exactly the same.
Wow, that's neat. And can you do that on an actual gun, or is it like a training gun type of thing?
So we had training guns.
Okay.
You could do it on a regular gun.
Yeah.
So you could do it on a regular gun, but that wouldn't require CO2.
Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to use something else. I imagine. Training.
No, the gun would.
Yeah.
On a regular gun, it would just recoil itself.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It would have its own recoil.
Gotcha. That's neat. So you go into that, and then what comes next?
So I was getting ready to start my own consulting firm, and I reached out to a friend that was working in a larger consulting firm, and they ended up bringing me in.
Okay.
And so I worked there for a couple years.
Okay.
And I got to see behind Reese, I didn't want to travel a lot.
Okay.
So I was trying to get some business.
What year would this have been, out of curiosity?
This was right around 2019,
Okay.
2020,
Yeah.
20, I don't remember.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you didn't want to travel a lot, then 2020 rolls around, you might have lucked out on that.
No, I did there. I didn't want to travel a lot because when Scott, between 2001 and 2014, during the global war on terrorism, I was deployed quite a bit. So
Sure.
71 months in total.
Wow.
In fact, 2012 is, between those dates, 2012 is the only year I did not have months deployed.
Wow.
And then my last job, I was partnered with a 4-star general, and we were responsible for 235,000 active component soldiers, and then the Army Reserve fell under us, and we had some. So I was traveling 3 weeks a month, 3 or 4 days.
Quite a bit, I imagine.
For 3 years.
Wow, I'm sure you got sick of it.
Yeah, Scott didn't want to travel.
Yeah, you just wanted to relax at home.
I wanted to be a member of a community.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Well, and there's something to be said for that. I mean, you worked hard to get to that point. So, right. I don't blame you. I don't blame you a bit for wanting to do that.
So it was fantastic. I learned a lot.
Sure.
And I got exposed to a lot. I was working with a manufacturing company on the West Coast a week a quarter. I had a paving company I was working with in Detroit. I had a construction company, a large construction company down in Florida, a tool and die company in Pittsburgh, and my dance card was getting more full.
Yeah, yeah.
and I wasn't getting business here.
Yeah.
And so I just decided, okay, I'm going to start my own thing, and we're going to figure this out.
Yeah. What was the because you said you got out of the Army and you wanted to start your own thing.
I
So
did.
this was always in your mind type of thing. What was there any critical point where you said to yourself, okay, it's time to start my own thing? Like, were you gone from the house too much or something like that? It was the third week away and you said it's time to start my own thing, or was it just time?
The good news is I don't have to do anything.
Sure.
I get to do this.
Yeah.
And why did it?
Maybe it was just time.
No, I don't think it's that. I think I examined my values,
Mm-hmm.
and I want independence, stability, and autonomy.
Yeah.
For myself, and I want to, and I did 34 years
Mm-hmm.
of, towing the line, and hey, and I just wanted the autonomy of being able to work on my own,
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to be creative and create some of the stuff that I'm doing now. So for the proximity group, we focus on leader development,
Mm-hmm.
right? So team enablement, we help with strategic planning, but also custom problem solving. So if there's a organization that's challenged, I had somebody refer a large construction company to me that they were looking to put a mentorship program together,
Oh, cool.
and said we want to do a mentorship program. So I talked them through it and worked through some things, and there's a lot of folks that want to do mentorship,
Mm-hmm.
and we talk about teaching, coaching, and mentoring.
Mm-hmm.
Those words aren't synonyms.
They're not. A lot of people treat them like they are, though.
That's right.
Mhm.
We interchange it, and I've come to the conclusion that mentorship is a lot to leadership is a lot like flour is to baking. You
Yeah, they're both.
Flour's not a food.
Mm-hmm.
You can't eat it, but it's a key ingredient to everything that you bake.
Yeah, I can
So-
see that.
Mentorship to leadership is a key ingredient to everything that you do,
Yeah.
from recruiting to onboarding to training to
Mhm.
leading to doing succession planning, and promoting folks. It's about mentorship, and
Yeah.
and everybody deserves to be mentored,
Mhm.
but not everybody is entitled to having a mentor.
Yeah, that makes sense. So here's an interesting question for you, because I'm going to go back to your baking analogy here.
Sure.
So flours and cookies. You got my undivided attention, by the way. Talking about one of my favorite things, cookies. So anyways, do you think that? So based on your analogy, I think that you would say that a leader can't be a good leader if they're not a good mentor. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I
because,
would too.
a leader, one of the key responsibilities of a leader is to make more leaders.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Okay, let's double down on this. Do you think that a mentor can be a good mentor but not a good leader? So the other way around.
I think it's possible.
I think so too. I think so
it
too.
could
So, in other words, your analogy is perfect.
I think you could be.
Yeah.
But even if you're not in a leadership position, you can still lead,
Sure.
right? And you first. I found the hardest person to lead is the person I look in the mirror every day when I'm doing personal hygiene.
Yeah, making your decisions.
He's also the one that I get most frustrated with when
Sure.
things don't go right.
Yeah. Well, that's fair, man.
So when we lead ourselves, right, leading yourself, and I used to tell folks, hey, when I was the division sergeant major for the 101st, and we had old Abe was, he's screaming eagle on your shoulder. I used to tell folks, birds of a feather, what?
Yeah,
They flock together.
Yeah.
There's only two kinds of birds.
Mhm.
We had eagles, like old Abe on your shoulder, and we
Mhm.
have buzzards.
Mm-hmm.
And you might not, hang with the eagles. You might not become one, but you'll be closer to one than if you hang with the buzzards.
Yeah, that's true enough.
And they have leaders. The buzzards have leaders too.
Yeah, and they're they're not good influences. They're kind of anti-leaders.
That's right.
They're the opposites of who you want to be and who you want to attract.
That's right.
So, okay, so Proximity Group comes into play in 2019, 2020, I guess, or
July of 2022.
July of 2022. Okay, and then so you re-examined your values, and you said it's time. I want to do my own thing. You don't have to do anything, but you want to do this. So it's I would almost argue like your life's ambition with this piece. Your book is done at that point.
Book was done.
Book was done. Okay, and then so you know, as you're branching into this, you decide you want to consult. You decide you want to mentor, lead, and help other businesses and things like this. Did you have a specific target in mind, or did you have, even if it's a niche of business or size of business or type of person, or did you just start reaching out to your network? What was your next step here?
Yeah, it took me a little bit to figure that out, and I have found that I tell folks I like to work with folks who do hard work.
Okay.
And so I was in the infantry, and so most of my life I was doing hard work. And before I joined the Army, I worked in a lumber yard, doing pulpwood.
Wow.
And so I worked with a bunch of strong old dudes that, I mean, they worked their butt off, and that was one reason I joined the Army. I worked in that pulpwood yard and out in the woods for about 3 years, and I was like, dude, I am not going to do this.
That was enough.
My life.
Yeah.
And so I joined the Army, and then, so I found that I enjoyed, especially when I was with Solutions 21. You heard some of the type of companies I was working with. I connect well with construction, manufacturing, and folks in the trades.
Yeah, it sounds like hard labor type stuff. Yeah, and that's your background too, really, infantry and pulpwood and all the above. So yeah, it makes sense.
So I connect with those groups well. I kind of understand they have the same type of, oftentimes they have the same type of structure.
Sure.
That you have in the military. And so the leadership principles are the same. They just need to be applied a little bit differently.
Yeah. What do you think of? Have you heard of organizations that have non-militaristic structures? Like for instance, Facebook. Facebook came up with this. So it was like a thing where Mark Zuckerberg came out and said, you know, every Friday he would basically have a Q&A with all of his staff. And so instead of kind of having the militaristic hierarchy, so to speak, you know, general goes this, goes this, it was almost like the reverse. So, you know, there he was kind of under the scrutiny and of the scope of everybody, including the person he hired yesterday, type of thing. Have you ever worked with an organization that was like that, or mostly like militaristic structures?
I understand what you're saying, but I believe every company has a structure.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Every company has a structure. Otherwise, Mark, who's the last one? He makes the
he makes the final decision, right? Sure.
And I would say that what he's doing is he's just engaging the team. Yeah. And like a matrix structure where there's different types of structure, but like a matrix structure where folks are, you know, kind of weaving in and out, doing different things.
Yeah, different facets of organization and different skill sets and things like that. Yeah, I was wondering because, you know, as we advance and businesses advance and things like this, I agree with you wholeheartedly. By the way, that all businesses have a certain structure. I would just say that some are not necessarily. The military can be quite linear. You know, like you know, well, it's dilinear, of course, because you have officers and enlisted and whatnot. But you know, you typically have a structure of rank, right? And so you know who outranks who and things like that, and it's linear in that way. Whereas I think a lot of organizations, the way that they are these days, is that you have different like departments, and so it's almost like still a structure, but almost like a more complex structure of like who reports to who and where does that go, and so
it can be be ambiguous, and that creates some confusion.
Sure.
And when folks think about the military, right, most of the time they think about the big bureaucratic machine, right? It's slow to respond, you know, it's not flexible, and they have folks that execute, you know, blind obedience. But that might be at the high level, but what people don't see is that at the operational and the tactical level, it's very adaptable. It's very easy for folks folks to take initiative because they have to be able to take initiative and make decisions without having to look over their shoulders.
Sure.
You know, and a lot of folks, when they think about the military too, they think about frontline soldiers like the infantry, armor, special forces, folks like that, right? That's really about 20% of the force. But if you're getting ready to go out on a mission, and in the military, you need to know the mission of your unit. You need to know the purpose and the intent of where you're going and what you're doing. And you need to know the purpose and intent of your team and the purpose and intent of the next higher unit, right? And you know, one of the things I work with companies on is leveraging intent-based leadership. Because if you can leverage intent-based leadership, everybody knows, you know, what their role is, how they contribute in the organization, what they own, so what authorities they have, so they can exercise disciplined initiative, and they can make decisions with a CEO mindset. And that requires clarity, alignment, and engaged leadership.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense.
I came up with this thing called the Big Five.
Okay, let's hear about it.
And really, I was sitting in a paving conference, and I was listening to these paving professionals. I realized that their frustrations are real, right? Their frustrations are real. We can't get, and it's not just paving, it's every industry.
Sure.
We can't get people, it's hard to get people to come work for us. It's hard to get people to stay, to come to work on time. It's hard to get people to work. And while I was sitting there and I was listening to them, and I was thinking, I thought back to when I was a young soldier in the 82nd Airborne Division, and the brigade sergeant major's coming through doing a room inspection. And he came into my room, and Reese, my stuff was squared away. I mean,
immaculate.
He wasn't gonna find anything.
Yeah.
He was looking around, and he opened up my desk drawer. And he's a big black guy, but he spoke with a high voice. He said, "Hey, Airborne, what you got right here?" I said, "Excuse me, Sergeant Major." He opened my desk drawer, and he said, "This right here." I said, "What's that?" He said, "This money right here. This is a physical security violation."
Physical security.
Yeah, I didn't have it had value to it. So I didn't have it in my locker where it would be locked away. It was in the desk drawer where anybody could come in and take it.
Yeah.
And I said, "Sergeant Major, that's not even 40 cents. He said, "Airborne, you're half the problem."
Wow.
And so I was thinking about these paving professionals.
Yeah.
Hey, Airborne, you're half the problem.
Yeah.
Are you setting expectations? Are you giving them the tools that they need? Are you supervising them?
Yeah.
Are you telling them what they need to do next to get promoted to the next level?
Yeah.
So are we doing these things? And so I came up with the Big Five. It's vision, and mission. You got to know why you're there and where you're going. Priorities, what's most important. Structure of the organization, right? How are you built? How are you getting there? Clarity of roles and cadence of accountability. So when folks know why they're there and where you're going and what's most important, they understand how they fit, right? And what's expected of them. That reduces internal pressure inside the organization. When you have less pressure inside the organization, you can respond to external pressures much easier.
Sure. Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. The what you made me think of when we're thinking about on your third tenet of the Big Five is the structure of the organization. And I was thinking about other organizations that I know of that they have what I would call the complex structure, the hierarchy of their business. And for instance, the accounting department doesn't necessarily report to the IT department in this company, right? But there was a situation where somebody from the accounting department was telling somebody in the IT department to do something that wasn't IT related, and there was a confusion of leadership with that, right? Because nobody knew who was to report to who. It's kind of like that metaphor of everybody's playing basketball and everybody's just pointing at the ball,
Right.
So that makes perfect sense. The fifth tenet of the Big Five you were saying was cadence of
accountability. So having like meetings, and understanding KPIs, right?
Yeah, sure.
And measuring those things.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's what I thought you were talking about. But I just wanted to make sure that was it. In dealing with customers, I think that you should set, and I think people can call it different things, but it means the same thing effectively. But it's like setting timeline expectations.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Absolutely.
so it's like, you know, if somebody needs something to be done within 24 hours, but something that's going to take 3 weeks to get done, you know, there's a confusion of timeline expectations on these things.
What you have to do is communicate that.
Right.
If you tell them, hey,
Right.
this is going to be 3 weeks before I get to it,
Mm-hmm.
they can make a decision, or at least they understand that.
Yeah.
And when it's, put a reminder and let them know if something comes up and it's going to be 3 weeks and 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
At 2 weeks and
1 day
or 3 days,
Yeah.
say, hey, I need to apologize. This is what's happened.
Yeah.
And communicate with them. The challenge is, the problem comes when we don't want to tell folks those things, and we
For
don't
sure.
tell them, which creates bigger problems.
Yeah. I think, you know, I think people generally don't want to disappoint other people,
Right.
especially the people they're doing business with and
Right.
things like that. Unfortunately, that's life and that's reality, and these things happen. But I think that's a part of the issue of communication. You know, is that people don't want to communicate. They treat it as a failure, but at the end of the day, it's like in that example, on a 21-day process, is it really a big deal if it took 23 days or whatever like that? Sometimes it could be. Don't get me wrong, but most of the time, you know, that's within the realm of acceptance, I'll
Right.
say. You know, but that can be a challenging aspect of business for sure.
On your IT and accounting piece,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where leading through intent. That's where we align the organization, get the organization aligned, so
Sure.
everybody knows. Alignment happens in multiple directions. It just doesn't happen, you know, in stovepipes. It happens across the organization, so it happens in multiple directions. And
Yeah.
so
And it has to.
creating clarity. So clarity brings things into focus.
Mm-hmm.
Alignment allows for understanding.
Mhm.
And so when you have those things, that's where you help with the alignment and engage leadership. And so making sure you're having that communication with folks.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah. It's critical. I think that in general, I'm all for businesses not becoming confused within their hierarchies and organizations. And I've seen, you know, I'm sure you've seen these business meet the team type of charts, you know, where it'll start, you know, CEO or founder or whatever, and then president, vice president, and this side is accounting, this side is IT, and this side is operations or whatever. And then I'm sure you've seen this where you might have, you know, the divergence where you have, we'll just say marketing and accounting or something like this, and then they converge again because they'll have a department that answers to both of them basically.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of times that can create confusion.
Confusion and tension too,
Yeah,
right?
Sure. Yeah,
So
it's
people
like,
want to protect their turf, and
Yeah.
and who has the authority to task?
yeah, well, right, and so it's like if you get a task from both ends and each are going to take you 3 days, which one gets delivered in 3 days? You know,
Well, that's
so,
why the person needs to be able to ask the question. Okay, I need you to do this. Okay, what do you not want me to do?
right, yeah, like what's the
And so having that communication and just letting folks know it's okay to ask that question.
for sure, yeah, it's an interesting business is so interesting because I think it's ever evolving and the structure of them is ever evolving and the way you have to treat people is ever evolving too. And you know, as we get more and more folks into the workforce, it's very challenging to see, you know, how you have to behave and what types of things you can and can't do and stuff like that. And it's just one of those things you have to take care of over the course of time.
Yeah, I think to your point there is, Reese, I've not just, we talk about leader development, but and we were talking about it. Everybody exerts some type of leadership, whether it's just over themselves, right? In the workplace, we focus on senior leaders, mid-level leaders. We don't spend a lot of time on the frontline leaders as much. But you know who really gets neglected? It's those individual contributors that you're talking about.
Yeah.
The ones that are and by investing in them a little bit, you'll reap some fantastic rewards because they'll gain a lot more understandings on how they can contribute, how they can communicate with those. They got to be able to communicate with those other leaders and those across departments because those are the folks that they're like the connective tissue across the entire organization.
They are, and it just kind of reminds me of the Starbucks example. I don't know if you've heard of this or not, but do you know who creates the new drinks at Starbucks?
Either the baristas or the customers. I don't know. That's
yeah.
my guess.
It's the baristas, but it's the people that are actually in the store because the organization, the top level of the organization, the CEO, the president of Starbucks, thousands and thousands and thousands of employees, they reach out to the baristas to make the drinks. And lo and behold, they're the most successful coffee company ever, I don't really drink Starbucks, but it's just a great example of leadership that they've empowered, in my opinion, people on their front lines to make a contribution to their organization.
Yeah, that's where the greatest innovation comes from, right?
Mm-hmm.
The folks that are in contact every day.
Yeah,
Right.
and they're the ones that know it the best too.
Right.
So if it weren't for that innovation, then we wouldn't have pumpkin spice lattes. So that's the way these things go. Okay, I want to talk about the proximity group a little bit more. I have a great understanding of what you do and what types of organizations that you like to target. So what if you could work with like any company on helping with their leadership and things like that? What do you think you would choose?
I really enjoy construction companies.
Okay.
I really do.
Yeah.
Construction and manufacturing, those are the two that I really, really enjoy
Yeah.
working with.
It's like there's always something to improve type of thing.
It's so much more
Yeah.
than just, I think, had I not gone in the military,
Mm-hmm.
had I known about construction, I would have loved to have been in construction.
Really?
I just think it's so complex and it's so complex, and it's a team coming together
Sure.
that, I mean, you look at these buildings over here
Yeah.
in Charlotte. Look
Yeah.
at these things. I mean, you're building something that you will see for the rest of your life,
Yeah.
and your family will see,
Mm-hmm.
and you're building the community.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of, I think it's easy to, Anthony Robbins has a great quote. He says, most times people overestimate what they can achieve in a year, and they underestimate what they can achieve in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to that point, it's like when you're in the day to day and you're working on a building or something like that, you might have issues and plumbing issues, and rain comes and messes up your wood, and everybody endures these issues and whatnot. But 5 years from now, when the building is built, you have this giant, immaculate, amazing structure that you're a part of doing, and but to your point, you're exactly right. It requires a team to come together. It requires the effort of more than one individual and the effort of those individuals to come together. So that's a great point. Construction is a awesome industry, and God knows we have a bunch of it here in Charlotte.
and it's happening all over. So
Mm-hmm.
it's happening. You could be in a construction company in Charlotte, but you're working in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the contracts get awarded, and so that's a challenging part of construction is the field teams. The field teams are sometimes they're away from their families for a long time, and that creates some challenges too.
Sure.
And that's not different than the military either.
Mm-hmm.
And so being deployed quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why I identify with construction. They
Yeah.
have some, but it is just incredibly fascinating. Some of the decisions that they have to make.
Yeah, and sometimes they have to make decisions quickly too, and something that you have to have an answer by the end of the day.
Well, you have to adapt, right? And
Yeah.
so if you bring just think you just bring one of your trade partners, a subcontractor in. You bring a subcontractor in, and you're not ready for them, and they're sitting there.
Yeah.
And,
What do you do?
So what if it's 6 people? Every 10 minutes, that's one billable hour of
Mhm.
work.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not ready for them, and so I mean, time is money.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah. That's definitely one way to look at it, for sure. So what are you going to write your next book on here? Have you thought about it?
I have thought about it.
Yeah.
And I have thought about taking some of the content that I've put together
Yeah.
from the proximity group and some of the concepts that I've put together and putting it in a book. So for example, I put together four pillars of leader development for the proximity group, and I've developed 7 proximity practices. There's very little in the leadership space that's original.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I agree.
But it depends on how you package it.
Mm-hmm.
And so packaging it speaks to different people in different ways. And so, Stephen Covey has the 7 habits of highly effective people.
Mm-hmm.
I work with, the Army had 11 principles of leadership. the Solutions 21, who I work with, they had 9 behaviors of world-class performers. I harvested a couple from others, but I also created my own to put the proximity practices together. I think those are foundational, I call them practices. They could, and why practices and not behaviors or principles or anything like that? Because they are habits, they are principles. But I call them practices because you'll never master them. And what do athletes do? Athletes practice more than they play, right? And when things aren't going well, what do? They go back to the fundamentals. And so they focus on the fundamentals, and that's what these 7 proximity practices are. They're the fundamentals, and if you focus on these in your, it could be your personal life or your work life, you'll be much more effective and efficient.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, man, I can't wait to read this book one more time. It's Behind the Colors by Scott Schroeder. We are out of time for the day here, man. It's been wonderful having you on air. I always try to close out these episodes by asking something fun, and I kind of asked you something fun already about the next book, but let's see. We talked about if you didn't do the military. Okay, how about this? So, if you were going to assist a company, consult with a company in the entertainment field, okay? So that could be a sports team, or it could be, a movie set, or anything in the entertainment field at all. What would you choose and why?
I don't know. If I had to make a quick decision right now, I would probably say, sports team.
Yeah, well, the Carolina Panthers and improve us completely.
I wouldn't rule. I probably wouldn't be a good football coach.
Yeah.
Right. But the team is more than just the team that's on the field.
Sure.
And so the team is not just the folks that are on the field.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other folks. I mean, I don't know what the roster is, but what's the roster?
53.
53.
Yeah.
Right. There's probably a couple hundred people.
Yeah.
That are part of that team, and so they support the team that's on the field.
Yeah, and you think these days with sports teams, you have support in all sorts of different things, because you have a marketing department. You have the people that are recording the content, putting it out there, and managing the social media and the videos and stuff like that. And then of course you have things like what's it called, like shirts and jerseys and that stuff, like apparel, and you have departments that manage that stuff, and partners that manage sponsorships and seat sales, and you have all these people, facilities managements, and I could very easily see where there's room for a guy like you in that space.
But I could also see entertainment, because just look at this small room here, all the equipment that's here. If you're packing, maintenance, so how do you? There's a lot that goes into this, and making sure you have everything you need when you get to the venue. So any type of entertainment industry, I would enjoy that. I was in infantry, but my last job, I had several jobs where we had large organizations. I had aviation units that worked for us. So I was able to go down to an aviation unit and understand what bank time is, understand what phase maintenance is. So I have an understanding, and when they do phase maintenance on a helicopter, they pull everything out of it. They pull the transmissions off, they pull everything out of it. And so understanding those things and asking those questions, and I think that really prepared me to almost work with any industry.
Yeah.
I just chose to focus on construction, manufacturing, and the trades, because one, it's about the network. They're closer. So if you do some good work with some construction folks and you're doing stuff, then you get introduced to more construction folks.
Sure.
Or manufacturing. And if you're shooting, if you're trying to engage, it's easier to engage one group than it is to engage the whole world.
Sure.
And so that's why I've kind of necked it down to
riches and niches, man. Well, I will leave you on this note here, but the most important thing that I have learned in our time here together is that if you can understand helicopters, you can understand anything. So that's good. Scott, thank you so much for joining me today, man.
Reese, I appreciate it, and thank you very much for having me on.
Absolutely.
I look forward to staying connected with you.
Absolutely. Thanks, man. Alrighty. Great job, man.